My name is Lauren Mitchell. I am 32 years old. And 2 weeks ago, I paid nearly $400 for my own birthday dinner just to sit there while my entire family took turns tearing me down like it was some kind of group activity. They picked the restaurant after I offered to cover it. A chain Italian place in a shopping center. Not fancy, but expensive enough that I felt it when I handed over my card. And from the moment we sat down, they made sure I remembered exactly how small they think I am. My mother asked how the claim calls were going at my job, and before I could answer, she told the table that when people at church ask what I do, she just says, I work in healthcare administration, because saying I handle billing disputes all day sounds sad. My father cut in to brag that one of my cousins just closed on her third condo down south. She is what, 28? He said, while looking right at me, then added that it must be nice not to still be renting one tiny basement room from a stranger at my age. My brother joked that at least I do not have to maintain a whole house because you cannot even keep a savings account alive. My sister reached across the breadbasket, snatched my phone while it was face up, tapped my banking app like she had a right to, and held the screen up so everybody could see the negative $52 in my checking account. She laughed and told them someone should take a picture because who else shows up to their own birthday this broke? I sat there while my aunt compared me to some neighbor's son with a new hybrid in a townhouse. My brother brought up how my teachers used to call me gifted, then waved his fork at me and said, "Now you are just this." Finally, my father stood up with his glass over the table and said he wanted to make a birthday toast. I knew in my stomach it was not going to be the kind you frame on a wall, but I still was not ready for the words that came out of his mouth. Before I tell you what he said, and what happened after I walked out. Tell me, what time is it for you right now, and where are you watching from? I'm curious to see how far this story will travel. So here is what my father actually said with his wine glass hanging over my slice of birthday tiramisu. He cleared his throat, looked at everyone except me, and said, "To our biggest disappointment, may she at least find someone rich enough to keep her from moving back home." Then he laughed at his own line while my mother and siblings clinked their glasses together over my head like it was the funniest thing they had ever heard. Nobody hesitated, nobody flinched. Even my cousin joined in. I just sat there, hands in my lap, knife and fork untouched, feeling my ears heat up while a couple at the next table tried not to stare. My mother took a sip and added, almost casually, that she and my father had actually updated their will recently. "We decided everything goes to the kids who know what to do with it," she said, eyes still on her plate. "Lauren would just blow it on rent and grocery delivery." My brother smirked and said that at least now I had motivation. My sister nudged my arm with her elbow and told me not to be so sensitive, that it was just family honesty. And was I really going to sulk when they were trying to help? I did not argue. I did not cry. I did not grab my phone back or storm out. I asked the server for the check instead. When the little black folder came, my father patted his pockets like he might reach for his wallet, then let his hand fall and said, "You got this, right, birthday girl?" The total with tax and tip was a little over $400. My card went through only because it was credit, not the empty checking account they had just passed around like a group project. Outside in the cold parking lot, everyone suddenly turned normal again. My mother hugged me and told me she would see me for Christmas stuff. My brother slapped my shoulder. My sister asked if I wanted the group photo she had taken right after the toast. Nobody apologized. Nobody checked if I was okay. I drove back to the basement studio I rent from a widower on the other side of town, parked, and sat in my car with the engine off long enough that the windows fogged over. I kept hearing that word in my head, disappointment, like it was now my official title. When I finally went inside, I did two things. I opened my laptop and pulled up 3 accounts that had quietly ruled my life for years. Then I made 3 phone calls, one to a mortgage company in another state, one to an auto lender, and one to my landlord upstairs. When I went to bed a couple of hours later, nothing in their world had changed yet. They were still laughing about their little toast, completely unaware that I had just yanked out the only safety net they actually had. The funny thing is, my family has always talked about me like I am the one holding everyone back, the kid who never quite launched. But if you looked at my bank statements for the last 6 years, you would think I was the only one holding anything together, while they were teasing me about -$52 at that table. They had no idea that the reason my checking account hovers near empty most of the time is that every month since I was 26, between $800 and $1,200 has gone straight from my paychecks to their bills. My job in medical billing does not pay badly for my city, around $43,000 a year. But it is not magic money. When my father's remodeling business started slowing down, he called me and said they were a little short on the mortgage, and could I help for just a few months until more jobs came in? The mortgage on their 3-bedroom in the suburbs is almost $3,000 a month. My mother's part-time job at a dental office covers groceries and utilities when things are good, but that is it. So I set up an automatic payment from my account directly to their mortgage servicer. I told myself it would be temporary. Then, when my brother wanted a new SUV for his sales job, and his credit was not clean enough, he asked me to co-sign. He promised I would never actually have to pay anything. 3 separate times in 2 years he called, just this once when he was behind. And instead of letting the loan default, I made the payment. By last fall, the bank knew my card number by heart whenever that account came up. Meanwhile, my mother insisted I never mention any of this to my brother and sister because it would only cause drama. So they got to see me as the broke one, the one renting a basement, while my money quietly made sure my parents kept their house, and my brother kept his shiny car. After the dinner, I went quiet. I did not answer my mother's texts about picking a day for our little family Christmas. I let my father's missed calls pile up without listening to the messages where he said they were just joking around. My sister sent me screenshots from that night, the one with my bank balance circled in red like some kind of meme. My thumb hovered over the reply button more than once, but I did not give them anything. At work, I kept my headset on, processed claims, and ignored the buzzing phone face down in my drawer. On day 10 after the dinner, my mother sent me a long message about how she was concerned that I was being distant and how family should not let misunderstandings fester. She did not mention the toast, or the will, or the fact that they had laughed while she called me a waste of an inheritance. Day 15, my father left a voicemail saying they had something important about the house they needed to talk about. But still, no one said the word sorry. Then, 20 days after that dinner, I sat on my lunch break, finally counted and realized that between my parents, my brother, my sister, my aunt, and my cousin, they had sent me 148 messages in every possible channel: text, voicemail, social media, email, all demanding to know why I was ignoring them, asking what I had done, warning me about consequences. They were spiraling, and they still did not know the one simple fact underneath it all. The only reason their life had not fallen apart years ago was sitting in a beige cubicle with a clearance badge around her neck, trying very hard not to throw up from the mix of anger and relief every time another "call me now" buzzed through and went unanswered. By the time the calendar hit the first of the month after my birthday, the 3 calls I had made from my basement that night finally showed up in their world. The automatic payment I had been sending to my parents' mortgage for 6 straight years did not go through because I had canceled it, and instead of quietly covering the gap like it always did, the bank tried to draft from my father's nearly empty account, pushed it into the red, and sent a warning letter. My mother blew up my phone with texts that morning, saying something was wrong with our auto pay, like it belonged to them, asking if the bank had messed up. My father, who normally hates dealing with any sort of customer service line, left a voicemail snarling about these lenders playing games. I knew exactly what had happened. I had sat on hold with that mortgage company while the server at the restaurant wrapped my uneaten entree, listened to the representative confirm my name and the last 4 digits of the account I had been paying on, then asked her to remove my card and cancel the draft. She had sounded almost surprised that I was the one paying, not the owners on the loan, and politely reminded me that without another method on file, the next due date would not be met. I thanked her, hung up, and moved on to the auto lender. On the 7th of the month, my father was waiting for me in the parking lot outside my office building when my shift ended. It was already dark, but I recognized his truck parked crooked across 2 spaces. He stepped in front of my compact car before I could pull away and motioned for me to roll down the window. "We need to talk about the house," he said, trying to keep his voice low while other employees walked past. I told him I had somewhere to be, which was a lie. I had nowhere at all to be that night except away from him. He planted his hands on my hood and asked why the mortgage people were saying the automatic payment had been canceled. I reminded him that I am the one who set it up, and I am the one who can stop it. His mouth actually opened and closed twice like a fish before he found words. "You cannot just do that," he said. "We were counting on you." I asked him if he remembered what he said at my birthday dinner when he held his glass over my cake. His eyes flicked away. He muttered something about, "just giving you a push." I put my car in reverse and told him the bank had given him one too, then backed out while he was still shouting my name. That night, my brother finally put 2 and 2 together. He called me from his apartment, voice already raised before I even said hello. "Did you stop paying my car?" he demanded. For the last 2 years, every time he was late, I had gone online and made sure the payment was covered by the 15th. The 3 calls I made after dinner had included the auto lender, not just to ask what happened if I stopped covering it, but to tell them I would not be authorizing any more charges. The woman on the line had explained that if the primary borrower stayed late, the account would go into delinquency and eventually the vehicle would be taken back, and that both our credit scores would take the hit. "You are screwing us both just to prove some weird point," my brother said now, breathing hard into the phone. I asked him if he remembered my sister broadcasting my bank balance to the whole family, if he remembered laughing when my mother said I would waste any inheritance, if he remembered clinking his glass when our father toasted to me being a disappointment. He said they were just messing around, that I am being dramatic, that family has always joked like that. I told him that from this month forward, he would find out what it feels like to be treated like an actual adult. Then I hung up before he could spin it back around. 2 days later, on my way into work, I watched through the glass lobby doors as a tow truck hooked his shiny SUV in the visitor lot where he had parked it to surprise me. He was standing there in a dress shirt, talking rapidly on his phone, while a couple of his coworkers watched from the sidewalk. One of the guards stepped between us as I approached, already briefed after my earlier warning that my family might show up. My brother saw me, pointed, and yelled that this was my fault. But I just flashed my badge, walked past, and sat down at my desk, knowing that for the first time since I had signed my name next to his on that loan, the consequences of his choices were finally landing where they belonged. The week after the tow truck hauled my brother's SUV away, my life in that basement studio started to feel less like a home and more like a trap that kept me within driving distance of people who thought nothing of using me as an ATM they could insult. So I knocked on the door upstairs and told Patrick, my landlord, that I would be moving out by the middle of the next month. We had been on a month-to-month arrangement for a while. He is a widowed high school teacher who rents out the finished basement to cover extras. And when I told him I was leaving for work stuff, He asked only that I give him a firm date. He even offered to write me a reference for future landlords. I went back downstairs and paid for 3 weeks at an extended stay hotel across town. Using part of the money I had tucked away in an online savings account my family did not know exists. Nearly $19,000 built slowly over 3 years by living cheap while sending them most of what I made. The move out itself was quick. Everything I own fits into the back of my small car, 2 suitcases, some plastic bins, a thrifted bookshelf. I left a lamp behind for the next renter. By the time my mother figured out I was gone, it was because she had driven over to ask me in person why her mortgage company was now charging late fees. Patrick texted me later that day saying a woman had shown up asking for me, said she was my mother, and when he told her I had moved out, she pushed for where? For my new number. Even tried to peek past him down the stairs. He told her politely that he could not share a former tenant's information, not out of loyalty to me, but because that is just how he does things. My mother responded by sending me a string of texts calling me cold, selfish, ungrateful, and demanding I explain what I had done to their accounts. My aunt started calling from her salon between haircuts, leaving voicemails about how I was destroying my parents when I did not answer. She sent a message telling me that her daughter Megan, the same cousin held up at my birthday as the gold standard, was shocked I would abandon family. I took a screenshot of 6 years of monthly transfers from my bank app, the ones labeled with my parents' names and the mortgage company, the amounts spelled out line after line, and sent it directly to Megan with no caption. An hour later, she wrote back, "Is this real?" I told her to ask her mother and mine. My sister finally caught me in person at a grocery store near my office. I had parked far away from my building to avoid my father. But as I reached for a carton of eggs, I heard my name and turned to see her with a shopping basket and dark circles under her eyes. "We need to talk," she said, blocking my cart with hers. I tried to step around her. She followed. "Do you have any idea what you are doing to Mom?" she said. "She is not sleeping. Dad looks sick. They might lose the house." I asked her if she still had the photo she took of my bank balance at my birthday dinner. Her face flushed. She tried to tell me that night was just them trying to wake me up. I pulled out my phone, opened my transaction history, and held it where only she could see. Years of regular transfers. All those 3- and 4-figure amounts she had never bothered to ask about. She stared so long the automatic music in the store looped twice, then whispered, "Why did they never tell us?" I told her to go home and ask, to look around at every new thing our parents had bought in the past few years, and understand whose paycheck really paid for it. She did not follow me to the register. Later that night, my mother called screaming that I had no right to tell my siblings about private financial arrangements, that I was turning them against her. But each time she hurled another accusation, all I heard was her voice over my birthday cake, telling a table full of people that anything she left me would just be wasted. And for once, I did not let her talk long enough to drown out my own thoughts. Christmas week hit like a storm that only blew in one direction, straight at my phone, my email, my work line. My mother sent an email from an address she usually only uses for online coupons, writing paragraph after paragraph about how family is supposed to forgive, how she had raised me better than to hold a grudge over jokes. How my father was sitting at the kitchen table late into the night, sorting through bills and muttering to himself. How the bank had started a process that could end with them losing everything they worked for. My father texted me that he knew he went too far at the dinner, blamed the wine and the stress, and claimed he had not meant what he said when he called me a disappointment. But his version of an apology slid immediately into reminders that, "You know we need you right now." My brother tried showing up outside my office again on December 26th. This time, security did not wait for me to ask. They walked out to the sidewalk where he was pacing on the phone and told him he could not loiter when he pointed to me through the glass and said, "That is my sister." They stood between us anyway. Later, he texted that going to my job was the only way to make me face what I was doing. He said if I was going to abandon them, I should at least listen in person. I had already told my supervisor that some personal issues might spill into the parking lot, and she had quietly told me that as long as I did my work, they would back me up. In the middle of all this, my coworker Jasmine slid a travel mug of coffee onto my desk one morning and asked, without prying, how I was holding up. I told her more than I had planned to, about the dinner, about the money, about the calls I had made afterward. She did not tell me I was overreacting. She did not suggest I sit down and talk it out with people who had just humiliated me. She asked me a different question. If they were not related to you, would you ever tolerate this? When I said no, she told me about a fully remote position a friend of hers had mentioned at a tech-adjacent company in another state. Better pay, more room to move up. She forwarded me the listing and sat with me on my lunch break while I rewrote my resume over the next week, sandwiched between angry messages about foreclosure notices and emotional blackmail about ruining Christmas. I had 3 video interviews from the little desk in my hotel room, my laptop propped on a stack of takeout menus. While my family was lighting their tree without me for the first time, I was answering questions about denial codes and workflow management with a neutral bookshelf in the background, when my aunt called on Christmas Eve to say she was ashamed of me, told me I had so much potential, and had thrown it away to answer phones in a cubicle. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because she was still repeating the same script about my wasted promise, even as the result of that promise, my steady, if unimpressive career, was the only reason her sister had stayed in a house that now felt like it was built on my back. I told her calmly that in 6 years, I had sent over $70,000 to my parents, that my brother's repossessed SUV had my name on the paperwork, that every time my mother flashed a new tablet or my father bragged about their trip to Florida, it was my card that had freed up their cash. There was a long silence. Then she said, "They never said," like that excused anything. That night, as the hotel's thin curtains leaked colored reflections from someone else's decorations outside, I opened an email with the subject line, "Offer." And for the first time, I read a number that actually matched the amount of energy I have been pouring into work for years. The offer letter was dated January 9th. The base salary was $72,000 a year, fully remote, based out west in a city I have only ever seen on television. I took a deep breath, signed it electronically, and stared at the confirmation screen until my phone lit up again with my brother's name. I did not recognize the number because he had borrowed someone else's. "We need to sit down and fix this," he said before I could say hello, his voice tight. "The house. Mom, Dad, this has gone far enough." I asked him what exactly he thought I should fix. He said I was being stubborn, holding on to one bad night and using it as an excuse to walk away from my responsibilities. I reminded him that my responsibilities had never actually belonged to me, that nobody had a right to my paycheck, especially not people who had lined up to mock me for having so little left over. When he started to list all the ways our parents had always been there for us, I asked him if any of that involvement had included treating me with basic respect in public. He did not answer. He just circled back, over and over, to the same point, that the family was falling apart and that I was letting it. I told him I had accepted a new job and that I would be moving a few states away before the end of the month. He demanded to know where. Said they deserved at least to know how to reach me. I said calmly that the point of moving was that they would not be able to show up at my work or my front door anymore. He called me heartless. I asked him if he thought holding my phone up over dinner to show everyone my overdraft was kind. And for once, he did not have a clever comeback. My mother's last real attempt came the next day. She called. And when I let it go to voicemail, she followed with a text saying she was done begging, that if I did not call back that day, I was no longer her daughter. As if I had not already heard that verdict in every word she spoke over my cake. My father tried one more guilt-soaked message about how he had been under pressure when he said what he said, that losing the house would break him. I thought about all the nights my own chest felt tight after wiring them money I needed for my own rent, how no one had ever considered that stress worth mentioning. Then I opened my phone settings and blocked every one of their numbers, along with my aunts, my cousins, even my sisters and brothers. I blocked them on social media, flagged their emails to go straight to a filter I will never open. 2 months later, after I had unpacked in a modest but clean, one-bedroom apartment in a sun-baked city where no one knows my last name, a mutual acquaintance from back home sent me a short message. Your parents' place is listed on an auction site. The bank had moved faster than even I expected, with no more secret payments to hide the gaps. The arrears piled up, the foreclosure went through, the house sold for less than they owed, and my parents walked away, not with equity, but with a notice on their credit that will follow them for years. My brother, already dinged by the repossession of his SUV, found landlords reluctant to rent to him without extra deposits. My sister drained her small savings trying to keep our parents in a halfway decent rental, then realized she could not carry them either. My aunt's salon clients, who had heard for years about her successful nephew and the daughter with 3 places down south, now heard different stories whispered under the blow dryers about a couple who let one child bankroll their lifestyle while calling her a waste of potential. When I think about them now, I picture a house with the lights off and a lockbox on the door. A place that stood for decades as the symbol of everything they were proud of, reduced to a line on someone else's investment sheet. And I ask myself the question I wish someone had asked me years ago. What do you owe people who only loved the version of you that kept them comfortable? I do not feel triumphant that they lost so much, but I do feel something they never gave me. Peace. They spent years telling me I was their biggest disappointment. It turns out the real shame was how quickly their world collapsed once the disappointment finally chose herself. Said the bank started foreclosure proceedings. Is that real? I confirmed that they were behind and that the bank had likely sent a notice after 30 days late. She replied, "She is telling everyone you blindsided them." I asked her if my mom had also told everyone that I had been covering their mortgage for years. She sent 3 dots, and then, no, she kind of left that part out. Around that same week, my brother Eric showed up at the storage facility again. This time, security stopped him before he could reach the front door because the manager had flagged his earlier scene in the parking lot. He texted me afterward calling me pathetic for getting security involved, implying that protecting my workplace boundaries was somehow a betrayal. My sister Megan, who had been quiet since our parking lot confrontation, finally reached out again, this time with a more subdued tone, asking if I would meet her at a coffee shop near the mall. I agreed, more out of curiosity about what version of the story my parents were now spinning than anything else. She showed up looking drained, ordered a drink with shaking hands, and said, "They are going to lose the house. They got another letter. I heard Dad talking about maybe declaring bankruptcy. They keep saying if you would just forgive them and go back to how things were, they could fix it." I asked her if she genuinely believed that the solution to years of being disrespected was for me to quietly resume sending my paycheck to the same people who had mocked me with that negative balance screenshot. She did not answer directly, just said, "I do not know what else to do." And that was the thing. They had never even considered adjusting their own spending, selling things, downsizing, asking the children they were proud of to step up. In their minds, the only acceptable fix was to rebuild the same invisible pipeline from my account to theirs. The interview I had been waiting on turned into an offer a week later. a remote customer operations job for a software company based out west that paid almost double what I made at the storage facility. It felt like someone had cracked a window in a stuffy room. I accepted, gave my 2 weeks' notice, and started looking at apartments not just across town but across state lines. If my family could show up at my work and my front door in one city, I realized, the only real boundary that would hold was distance they could not easily drive. So I circled a city on the map where I knew no one, where my parents had no cousins or old friends, and started planning a move they would not know about until I was already gone. By the time the new year rolled around, the consequences my family had spent years outrunning had finally caught up and started lapping them. My parents received a formal notice from their bank in early January giving them a clear timeline for foreclosure. They were officially in default. The late fees and penalties had stacked so high there was no way to pretend it was a minor setback anymore. Their credit cards, which they had used as a second income stream for as long as I could remember, were maxed out, and several had been closed. My dad's small construction business, which had been limping along for years on word of mouth and under-the-table jobs, lost its last big client when he had to admit he could not front the cost of materials. My mom's part-time job at a dental office barely covered groceries. Eric was taking ride shares to the dealership because his truck, the one I had co-signed, sat on a lot 40 miles away with a bright orange auction sticker on the windshield. His credit score had dropped so low from the repossession that even renting an apartment on his own was going to be a battle. Megan was stuck playing chauffeur when she was not at work, juggling her own bills with the constant pressure from my parents to just put this one thing on your card so they could bridge the gap. My Aunt Diane, after seeing the transfers with her own eyes and realizing just how much I had poured into that house over 6 years, quietly backed away from being their biggest defender. Stopped taking some of my mom's calls, which only made my mom more frantic. In the middle of all of that, I was packing cardboard boxes in my hotel room, labeling them with the name of a city none of them knew I had picked, signing a lease via email on a modest one-bedroom apartment in a Phoenix suburb that fit comfortably within the budget of my new remote job. I started that job at the beginning of February, still living out of suitcases and plastic bins, learning new software and meeting coworkers over video calls, none of whom had ever heard my parents' names, none of whom cared that my cousin owned property or that my brother used to drive a nice truck. In that new space, their voices were finally quiet. A week before my move date, my dad made one last attempt, texting from a number I did not recognize because I had blocked his main one, writing, "We know we messed up at dinner. We went too far. But you are still our daughter. We need to sit down and make a plan. We cannot do this without you." The words, "we cannot do this without you," told me everything I needed to know about how he still saw me. Not as a person with her own life, but as a walking safety net who had dared to step aside. My mom sent a long email talking about how their entire lives were in that house, how no parent should have to worry about being homeless, how she could not sleep, knowing strangers might walk through her kitchen at an open house someday, never once acknowledging that I had already been one missed paycheck away from not paying my own rent for years because of them, that I had lain awake in an attic more nights than I could count, wondering how I was going to make a $20 grocery budget stretch 2 weeks because I had agreed to send them $900 instead of $6. I read those messages once and then filed them away in a folder I named Evidence in case they ever tried to rewrite history. On the day I drove out of Tennessee, my car packed so full I could barely see out the back window. I turned my phone off for several hours when I finally powered it back on at a gas station somewhere in Arkansas. There were more missed calls, more texts, more pleas, but I did not answer. A month later, standing in my small but sunlit living room in Arizona, looking at secondhand furniture I had chosen for myself, logging into a bank account that was not bleeding out to cover someone else's mortgage. I got a final update through a cousin who still follows me on social media. My parents had lost the house. The bank had taken it to auction. They were moving into a cramped two-bedroom rental in a less desirable part of town, paying almost as much in rent as their old mortgage had been because they had waited too long to adjust. Most of their nice-to-have things, the big sectional couch, the fancy grill, the designer handbags my mom liked to post online, had been sold off piecemeal to cover moving costs and back bills. Eric and Megan were officially on their own with parents who could no longer co-sign, no longer float them, no longer pretend to be the rock-solid success story they had always presented. For a while, I wondered if I should feel guilty watching all of that unfold from 1,000 miles away. But then I would remember my mother's voice saying, "We tell people you are in operations, it sounds better than storage." Or my father laughing, "To Lauren, our biggest disappointment." As glasses clinked over my head, and the guilt would fade into something clearer, something like resolve. Because here is the lesson I learned the hard way, and the only one I really want anyone hearing this to take with them. Blood does not give someone a permanent claim on your labor or your bank account. If someone shows you again and again that they value what you do for them more than they value you, it is not cruelty to step away. It is self-respect. My parents chose to mock and belittle the same daughter who was quietly holding up their entire lifestyle. They chose pride and appearances over honesty and gratitude, and in the end, when the money stopped, the house, the cars, the image, all of it went with it. They were left with what they had earned, each other, a stack of bills with no invisible daughter to pay them, and the knowledge that the person they had called a disappointment built a life without them and finally, mercifully, stopped apologizing for saving herself.